Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Imagine that you were to walk into a real estate sales office, you were to look at a plan of a subdivision filled with villas, and you said, how many villas on this particular block? And they told you 13, and you said, I will buy them all. Now, that's actually a real story that was told to me by someone here in Dubai who worked with private clients, etc. And I think that it informs a very interesting side of the world that sometimes gets overlooked. And I want to explore that today. And it really touches on why is it that very rich people from all over the world buy real estate and invest in Canada, the US, UK, Australia, those ones principally, but also Dubai, also a bunch of these other places. And I think it's very important. So because it really factors into part of the decision-making process that we don't often include when we're thinking about where to go, and yet it possibly should be. I see a lot of times, I've discussed this, where there's a certain group of people who have this allure of like the banana republics, like, hey, I should go invest somewhere in the banana republics, right? And I'm gonna get better returns. And often you get worse returns, and so what was the point, right? At the same time, you're often exposing yourself to some things that you maybe aren't aware of. And, there's some parts of the world that maybe you'd be better off avoiding, and some of the places of the world that are actually better than they look on paper because of this. So we are going to dive into that subject today and examine it, hopefully pretty well. So I'm curious to hear off the top of your head, before you get started, what do you think the key factors are that drive that decision making? And yeah, I'm really curious to hear. So before we dive into that, please, if you haven't already, please subscribe, click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Really appreciate your support. We try to produce great content for you every single day, so go back and check out some of the previous videos. And if you're interested in help with these subjects of going international, either optimize your company by setting it up abroad or optimizing your personal life by relocating abroad, we help you with everything from the strategy to the implementation. Please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or check out our websites, offshorecitizen.net, offshorecapitalist.com, and send us a message through there. Okay, so this is kind of the much underappreciated thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and it's really about safety. And the safety comes in, I think, two key forms, okay? One is maybe three forms. One is the legal system, another is corruption, and a third is what we're going to call regulation. Okay, these three things can have, I guess we could add geopolitical in there as well, right? So going back to the story of the person in Dubai, like what is happening there, right? Is it just this person has so much money to throw around that who cares? No, absolutely not. Is it that that person is in a situation where they think, wow, what a great return I'm going to get on all these villas? No, absolutely not. They probably don't have any particular expectation of return, and they probably don't care. They're probably even willing to take a small loss on those properties. And this is very different from the mindset of a lot of other investors. I saw a situation in Vancouver, similar. Chinese investor came to town, went and drove around, looked at, I think it was 4 or 5 houses, over $5 million each. At the end, the realtor said, which one do you like? And they said, I'll take them all. And it's like, what's going on here? It's like, well, you have to understand that oftentimes these people are coming from a place where they're concerned about losing their money, okay? And so just to put yourself in the position of somebody who's made a lot of money in Africa, right? Pretty much anywhere in Africa. There's a reasonable chance that for political reasons, for like military, geopolitical reasons, for maybe how the money was made, maybe due to corruption, maybe lots of different things, they could literally just lose that money. And so the first objective is to preserve that money, protection of wealth. And so they're going to go and they're going to put it in something that is perceived as safe, okay? Literally, Dubai has been built a lot on foreign investment, partially in this form by providing a safe investing environment, or at least safer than surrounding areas. You see this with Chinese investors who will come in from some places. You see it with Russian investors who come in from some places. You see it with other areas in the Middle East. You see it with people from India, from Pakistan, from all these different areas. A lot of people come into certain areas to invest. Now, Interestingly, some of those same people, or some of the Emiratis, etc., will then go and invest in London. They'll go and invest in Australia. The Chinese will go and invest in Australia. They'll invest in Canada. They'll invest in New Zealand. They'll invest in US, etc. And you might look at this and say, well, hang on, like, isn't this bad tax consequences? Isn't it bad, etc., etc.? That doesn't matter. That stuff is all secondary to simply keeping your money safe. And so when you think about going to a lot of these places, like, let's just talk about it in terms of the growth of an area, okay? I did a little interesting thought experiment a little while ago with you guys. I did a video on which countries are going to improve the most. And the thing that's interesting that we talked less about is, okay, like, what is required for a place to improve a lot? And I think one of the parts that maybe overlooked is a sound legal system, right? So let's think about just the idea of investment, right? So if you get a lot of investment coming into a country, that's generally positive for the country, right? But what's going to attract that investment? Of course, it's ideas and opportunities, it's pools of talent, it's, ability to activate that talent, it's, arbitrage, it's, things like this. But a big part of it is also the legal structure that's going to protect that investment. So an example of this is I would probably be very, very hesitant to invest in a company in Serbia. Why? Because I know that Serbia has a corrupt system where I could get screwed as an investor. So as an investor, I'm much more interested in investing in places where I know the legal system is going to protect me. I'd rather put my money in Singapore. I'd rather put my money in UK. I'd rather put my money in the US, even at the expense of maybe lower yields, maybe even at the expense of higher taxes, etc. And this is a big, big thing, right? Very, very important to think about. I've seen some people where they would be like out there going to some sort of a conference where they're pitching real estate in Honduras or pitching real estate in Costa Rica or something like that. They don't know anything about these environments. I remember we were helping a client, this was years, like over a decade ago, or maybe around a decade ago, anyway, whatever it was. And he was looking at lending some money based on some property in Costa Rica. And it was very interesting for two different reasons. Number one was, they said, oh, great, yeah, we're going to provide you with this land as security. And we said, okay, sure, no problems. Just send us comparables on the land. We want to see, what the land, or we were like, well, what's the land worth? Like, I think they were lending $150,000 or something. Like, oh, it's worth like $400,000. I said, okay, great, no problems. Just send us the comparables. Like, oh, what's difficult to get comparables? It's, all this stuff. What are you talking about? I thought you said, it's obviously worth this. And the comparables they had were just totally out of whack, completely. By the time we looked it over, we figured that probably in a fire sale environment, the property was worth like 25 grand or something like that. So the security was terrible, right? And this happens a lot, right? Where somebody gets sold some dream based on, not understanding the environment. And that's problematic, right? Then on the flip side, what have you got? We've got this situation where somebody might go and they might invest in some area that maybe it's not the values that are the problem. It's just like they could literally lose that land, literally lose that money. There was some guy who was pitching an investment. It was into biodiesel that they were getting from somewhere in Africa at one point in time. I remember this was years ago. And a mentor of mine took like one look at it and was like, don't even touch it. Like, don't, this is a very bad environment to invest in. Basic things that you are used to relying on in your home country, like being able to pull title and know who owns that property, you do not know here. It's very, very difficult to do that. And I think that's super, super important to understand, okay? A country, a big part of the reason why you can be somewhat more bullish about Ireland, about UK, about Singapore, about Canada, about the US, about Australia, etc., even when things look bad in many regards. Like, for example, we look at some of these places and there seems like a political mess, right? There's lots of problems going on in these places. But they still are attracting people and they still are attracting capital. Why? Because they have an environment that at least is pretty safe and predictable. Now, some people might argue, hey, listen, they're getting closer to confiscation of wealth and things like this. If that happens, that will be a tipping point that will be terrible for those places. But at least up till this point in time, it has a semblance of safety. that semblance has created these feedback loops where, you know, real estate in London tends to not only be stable, but tends to go up pretty consistently over a long period of time. Same thing with real estate in Sydney. Same thing with real estate in Vancouver. Same thing with real estate in Silicon Valley or the Golden Triangle area of LA or things like this, right? Like there's this self-fulfilling prophecy that comes from that perceived stability. And that stability, I mean, I say it's perceived, but it's actually very real in a bunch of regards. And so I think when you're considering where to go, when you're considering where to invest, I had somebody make a comment the other day, and I'll definitely try to create a video on this, asking about, you know, hey, what are good places around the world to invest in real estate? And it's like, okay, well, that's one of the things you should be considering, right? If you're in and sometimes it's worth it, right? I had a client who was investing in Cuba at one point in time and was getting, the yields were, it was super, super risky, but the yields were so high that it justified it, right? And he was comfortable with that risk, but he understood that risk, right? There's nothing worse than having risks you don't understand. Very, very bad, right? Very, very bad. Especially, you know, when they have high severity in the event that they show up. So anyway, this is, I think, a really important thing to realize, is just that there's actually, no matter where you go in the world, you may decide, you know, you want to go and live in Malaysia, great place. You know, you want to go live in Thailand, wonderful. You know, you want to go live in, I don't know, Bulgaria or Panama or Nicaragua or Mexico, fantastic. But you may decide that even in that environment, you want to invest your money in UK, you want to invest your money in the US, you want to invest your money in Australia. Not always, it's not always going to be the best, of course, but there is still a degree of security that you get in some of these places that you as yet don't get as much of in a bunch of other places. And then there's some places that are middle of the road where it's probably fine, right? You can go to Georgia and some things work really, really well in terms of how they've organized their land titling systems, et cetera. And, you know, it's very efficient and those things work really well. So, you know, great, there could be some payoff there. There could be some arbitrage, but it is something to be aware of. So anyway, I hope that helps. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts. If you have any kind of insights in terms of parts of the world that, you know, are particularly bad, parts of the world that are particularly good, you know, other factors that I'm not mentioning here. And so, yeah, let me know. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. Really appreciate your support. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you guys. Oh, before we go on, if you haven't already, go over and check out my other channel, the Solutions Podcast. We talk about, you know, cool international issues and do really in-depth, long-form conversation, trying to brainstorm solutions to, you know, world problems. So anyway, I'm going to look forward to talking to you guys on the next video.